السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له محمد رسول الله رفيعا إنك لا تخلص اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. ثم أما بعد. Brothers and sisters, what I wanted to talk about today is a reflection of a holiday that's coming. And so this coming Monday is Columbus Day. Columbus Day. It's a public holiday, a federal government holiday in what's arguably the most powerful country in the world, named after somebody who, if you read about him, didn't even know what he was doing, didn't even know where he was going. So he set sail from Spain on behalf of Ferdinand and Isabella, looking for India so he can get spices and engage in trade and whatever. And so he ends up in the Caribbean. And so because of him, thinking that he had arrived in India, it's called the West Indies. And then he came into America and he saw the Native Americans and he was like, hello, Indians. And they must have been like, what are you talking about? So this guy was clearly like, he's not the greatest navigator. And yet he is commemorated and recognized in this manner. And so this is a part of sometimes the injustices that we see in the world. It's a small reflection of that. Now some people are perhaps rightly referring to Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day, to commemorate people around the world who have been decimated and annihilated because they didn't have the same firepower that the invader may have had, and had their land taken away from them, their resources taken away from them. And the story of Columbus and America and the Native Americans, or the Indians, if we should call them incorrectly, that is a reflection of what's happened in many, many places around the world. So this has also happened to the Muslims in the days of colonialism, although the Muslims were somewhat better off. We didn't suffer the way certain people suffered, where their numbers were completely destroyed. The livestock that they fed on was completely annihilated to the point where they were starving themselves, and their land was permanently taken away from them. We went through colonization, yes, we went through imperial powers, but in most cases, with maybe one exception right now, which exists now, which is Gaza in Palestine, in most cases the Muslims got their land back. They got their land and their resources back, the place where there are indigenous peoples of. But if you look at what the Aboriginal people went through in New Zealand and in Australia, if you look at what the native people went through in the North and South American continent, they suffered much more than the Muslims have. And it could be that we didn't suffer as much as possible, that perhaps we are under the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because despite our mistakes and sins and not following Islam the way it should be followed, we are ultimately people of Tawheed. So perhaps we enjoy that protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, because our religion teaches us to fight. It teaches us to fight oppression. And so when the Muslim is oppressed, and that oppression forces them to go back to their religion, forces them to look into what they had been neglectful of, their religion, their books tell him that a Muslim should live with honor. So the world over, Muslims have fought to get their land and to get their resources and to get their dignity back. So alhamdulillah, because of these things, we didn't suffer as much as other people had. But this discussion of what happened around the world and what routinely keeps happening reminds us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes punishes a people through another people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes brings a people back to the way they should be through a temporary humiliation that they suffer at the hands of another people. Because ultimately, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the world belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He gives it to whomever He pleases. And sometimes Allah will punish a people or rectify a people by bringing upon them another people who may even be a disbelieving people. This is the way of the world, and this is the way things have been. But all of this discourse makes us realize the concept of what freedom is, right? It makes us think about the ideas of slavery and colonialism and imperial powers and indigenous people and what it means to be free. Now freedom, the concept of freedom exists in Islam. But the Islamic understanding of what the construct of freedom is, or what it ought to be for the believer, is a little bit different from the secular construct, the secular notion of freedom. One of the stories that is most repetitively mentioned in the Quran is the story of Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam, how he was brought up in the house of Firaun, how Musa alayhi salam lived as an adult, how Musa alayhi salam faced off against the magicians, Musa alayhi salam this, how he received revelation, how he spoke with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all these things. But one of the things that could be called the main mission of Musa alayhi salam, after he received Nubuwah, and among other important things like he was the receiver of the Torah, is his mission to set free the Bani Israel. The Bani Israel had been taken as slaves by Firaun. And so under this slavery of Firaun, they were subject to a lot of humiliation. يُذَبِّحُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ Firaun would kill their children, and he would take prisoner their women, and you know what that means when he was taking prisoners, just the women. So they were suffering under a lot of humiliation under Firaun. And this idea of them being slaves of an arrogant a person who is a self-proclaimed God and now they are subject to him tells you that they were put under a great trial in this dunya. They were probably not able to practice their religion as they should have been. And Bani Israel, when you think of Bani Israel, don't think of today's Israel. The Bani Israel were the Muslims of their time until Christianity came. And then the Christians, whoever followed Isa alayhi salam, they were the Muslims of their time until Islam came. And then Islam is the final religion. So those people that were being subjugated by Fir'aun, they were the Muslims of their time. Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salam, they were the valid prophets that had to be followed by them at that time. Under the subjugation and the tyranny of Fir'aun, they were not able to practice their religion as they should be. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends Musa alayhi salam, and it could have been the result of a punishment in this dunya based on what they have done. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends Musa alayhi salam to rescue them so they can be free one more time. And so that kind of freedom, should you and I be subject to that kind of freedom is freedom from the slavery to somebody else in this dunya, to be free so you can voluntarily be a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is freedom for the Muslim. You will never be completely free to do whatever you want, because a person who even thinks that he or she is free is still subject to the laws of the land they live in. They stop at red lights. They may not want to. They pay their taxes. They may not want to. They're subject to certain laws and rules and regulations, and if they don't follow them, they go to jail. Or they get, they could even get capital punishment. So we can never be completely free of laws. We will always be subject to certain laws. So the concept of freedom in the Muslim psyche is to be free to be in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires discipline. But what that does do is it frees you from this dunya. It frees a person from chasing the dunya, because the dunya will never ever be yours as a human being. This is true for the Muslim and the non-Muslim. The things that we chase in this world will never be ours forever. You will not be able to take your money to your grave, as you know, as we hear all the time. Your fame and recognition that you're chasing, it'll one day leave you and it'll go to somebody else. Somebody else who becomes more popular, more influential, more famous than what I may be choosing, right? Your family will leave you one day. Either you will die or they will die. Your house, everything that you've collected, your car, everything you will have to leave behind. So when people get so lost in the dunya, they are completely in ghafla of the akhirah, which is their permanent home, which is the home that they should be working for. And this is something that I tell myself before I advise my brothers and sisters, that the akhirah is that goal that we have to go after. And whoever achieves the akhirah, that is a person who has achieved true freedom. That is real freedom, because now you no longer have to work, you have no more constraints, you have no more rules. Now you are earning, you are enjoying the fruits that you worked for. But freedom in this dunya is, and behaving in a way that you have no accountability, actually puts you at risk of facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds us accountable for the things that we thought that we would never be accountable for, because we lived in this world as if we would have no one to ask for. So what we think is actually freedom leads to a person's destruction in the akhirah. Whereas a person who wants to truly be free in the akhirah is a person who lives in this dunya the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to live, in slavery, in submission. And that is what Islam is. Islam is submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Barakallahu li wa lakum bil Qur'an al-azim wa naf'ani wa iyyakum bi ayati wa dhikr al-hakim. Aqulu ma tasma'un wa astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa li sa'ir al-muslimin fastaghfiruhu innahu huwa al-ghafurur rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihil kareem wa ala ahlihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in a hadith that is narrated by Abu Huraira and is reported in Muslim, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, "Ad-dunya sijnul muslim, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min, wa jannatul kafir." This world is a prison for the mu'min, and it is a paradise for the disbeliever. This tells us two things. Number one, a believer could be a person who is very poor and is not able to do a lot of things because he doesn't have, or he or she doesn't have the financial wherewithal to do those things. That's one type of. Another type of believer is somebody who is like Harun al-Rashid, somebody who's like an emperor, who has all the resources that you can think of. Even then, he is not, if he truly believes in Allah, he is not going to live in this world like he is Fir'aun. He's not going to live in this world as if he is not accountable to, if he's accountable to no one. As if there are no rules that he's subjected to, there are no crimes that he can't be held accountable for. So even a Muslim who is in that state, a multi-billionaire, royalty, you name it, political, bigwig, whatever have you, even at that level, a Muslim, if he is conscious of his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fact that he will always be a slave, he will live in this dunya as if he is living in prison. That is how a true believer lives in this dunya, regardless of what resources he or she has available to him in this dunya. This is true for every mu'min. As Rasulullah said, that the world is like a prison for the believer, ad-dunya sijn al-mu'min, and then the opposite is for the disbeliever, wa jannatul kafir. And so and for the kafir, he or she makes this dunya their jannah. That doesn't only mean that they do whatever they want, they eat whatever they want, they have no dietary restrictions, they can do whatever they please, whatever makes them happy, the pursuit of gratification comes over. It doesn't just mean that, it also means that a person lives in this dunya and does things as if he will face no accountability, as if he will face no questioning. That is how somebody who lives in this dunya as if it's Jannah lives. And so the person who does that, Rasulullah said that this world is like that, as a paradise for a person who disbelieves. So a Muslim follows certain rules to be able to have true freedom in the akhirah. He lives by certain limits, by certain constraints, so he can truly be free in his real home, in his permanent home, and that is the home of the akhirah. But in this dunya, regardless of what you have and what you are able to do, this world for us is like a prison, Ramadan comes and goes every year, and Ramadan is not too far away now. Ramadan puts us under training for this exercise. Once a year, Muslims abstain from that which is not even haram. They abstain from food, they abstain from drink, they abstain from intimacy with their spouses. None of these things are haram. But in Ramadan, we prohibit ourselves these things in the month of Ramadan, even though they're not really haram for you, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says so. So for the remaining 11 months of the year, we are able to abstain from that which really is haram. Because turning away from that which is harmful for you requires discipline. And there is no better time to build that discipline except when the shayateen, as you know, are chained up and we are at our spiritual highest. So in Ramadan, we're not going to go into haram, of course, so we abstain from that which is halal, so we can prepare for that which is truly haram, so that we can live as slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what Ramadan is for. It is for our preparation to be in that final abode, and we can be in the state that we want to be in. Completely free, somebody who has completely won in every aspect of their life, and now they're enjoying the fruits of what they worked for forever. A test that is temporary, prohibiting yourself from following pursuits that are fleeting, that will never be yours permanently anyway, to earn a home that is permanent and forever. This is what Islam wants for us. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. There was a scholar who gave beautiful advice to his students, and this quote is so frequently repeated by our ulama today. I was Googling it, and Abu Amina Bilal Phillips, he quoted this as well, a quote that was made not by him but by an earlier scholar, who said that live in this world as if it's Ramadan, and your Eid will be after you die, your akhirah will be like your Eid. In the akhirah, you will be able to enjoy everything. That is true freedom that a Muslim strives for. But to be able to attain that is to live in this life as somebody who is in a prison, who is living as if he lives, as if a slave should live, because we are, after all, slaves of Allah Azza wa Jal. And when I sin, when I fall into bad habits, when I fall into anything evil that I do, that in my heart of hearts I know it's bad, what I'm actually doing is I'm giving up that happiness that I will attain in the akhirah for a temporary fleeting pleasure in this dunya. And it is the most foolish things that anyone can do, but that is essentially the core of what sin is, that we pursue gratification which is of no use anyway. It's going to be over in a matter of seconds. And the trade-off is so great. It is something that we would never do in business, but we do it with our akhirah, we do it with our own afterlife. And so Islam opens that vision for us so we can truly see the world for what it is, and we can truly strive for the akhirah the way we ought to be striving for something which is permanent, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the home that Allah intends for us after the day of judgment. What I want to close with today is something that happened in the life of Bilal radiallahu anh. Bilal was a person who was very beloved to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would make sure that Bilal gave the adhan, and his adhan was very much loved by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you know. And it was because of the Prophet's love for him, other companions, Umar ibn al-Khattab and others, loved to listen to Bilal. When Bilal was dying, this is a well-known story about him. His wife cried out, as anybody's spouse would have, if you and I were to be on our deathbed, how would our spouse and our children react? They would be very distraught. So his wife cried out when he was on his deathbed. She said, "Wa hazana, what a horrible day this is, that that her husband is dying." And when Bilal heard that, he said, "Wa taraba." He said, what an amazing moment this is. And then he said to his wife, he said, "Tomorrow I will be with Muhammad and his companions." Who says that? What person in their right mind says that when they are in the throes of death, right? And on top of that, you've got your spouse that you really care about, and she's crying and she's losing it. And that is a moment of death for many of us, if you were to witness the passing of somebody who's related to you. But look at his response. He's concerned about what he will be doing tomorrow. The only person who can make a statement like that, brothers and sisters, is a person who has lived a life well lived, who dies with no regrets, who is actually happy that this test is over, that his time in this dunya is over, and now he is finally getting what he had worked for. After the days and the weeks and the months and the decades it took, now he has finally reached that place where he gets to enjoy pleasure and happiness. And best of all of those things are for you forever. It's not something that you only enjoy in your youth. Now you're an old man, or you were a kid, you didn't get it. Now you're young for a few years, now you're going to be old again. You see it, but you can't partake in it. None of that exists in the akhirah. It is yours forever. You earned it, you worked for it. Allah doesn't just give it to you, He gives it to you forever. It'll never go away. No more prayer, no more fasting, it's all over, the test is over. But that is the life that we want to live. And to live that life means to live as slaves in this dunya. It's very hard to do. I know it's easy to give a khutbah. Again, this is true. This is something that I advise all of us, beginning with myself. But that is truly a life well lived. When we live in this world and we attain true happiness, true felicity in the akhirah. May Allah wish it for all of us. And it is something that we have to work for. And yes, you will make mistakes along the way. We will commit sins along the way. But it is good to recalibrate your compass and bring yourself back so you can live the life where your top priority is attaining Jannah, attaining one's home in the akhirah. That is true freedom. That is true happiness. Inna Allahu malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما عباد الله رحمكم الله اتقوا الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم ويثبت أقدامكم وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
جزاكم الله خير. أقيموا صفوفكم وتراصوا. Brothers, please stand with your shoulders and your ankles next to one another. And I always say the saying of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he would say that the best of you in prayer are the ones with the softest shoulders. So please be accommodating to your brother and don't make your brother uncomfortable by being very rough and tough. Just be soft and accommodating to your brother, inshallah. Jazakum Allah khair. أقيموا صفوفكم وتراصوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي يخرج المرعى فجعله ثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. اللهم ربنا لك الحمد حمدا كثيرا. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers, just wanted to remind you, brothers and sisters, about educational fund that we established. I mentioned this in the first khutbah. There's a lot of programs that we have in this community, and we have some of our members that need help with some of the payments. So again, this is one of the best legacy you could leave for yourself, to help a child learn the Quran, to help a youth become more involved in their community. There is outside, we request for your help and your sadaqatun jariyah for you, because when you die, this is one of the ways that your legacy will continue. There are brothers outside, inshallah. Go ahead and be able to chip in and help out the educational fund that we have here at PGME. Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feekum.